They go over to where the window was, and I seen somebody laying in there. And I walked over, and the window was open, and I touched her head, and I said, "You get that door open right now."
This is Anita Knutston. She was an 18-year-old student with an amazing sense of humor and a big group of friends who loved her. So when she disappeared in 2007, no one could understand why. And when her parents looked into her disappearance, their worst fears came true.
He told me that somebody killed her and...
Who hated Anita? And why? This made so little sense. Shockingly, it didn't make sense to the police either. For 15 years. Indeed, in 2022, there's been a huge update to the case, and Anita's killer was not who everyone was suspecting. Let's dive into the strange case of Anita Knutston and uncover all the bizarre plot twists that followed her tragic death. When Anita's family adopted her as a baby, they promised her nothing but love and protection.
I had to go to court and tell the judge I would take care of her and make sure she was safe her whole life.
Gordon and Sharon Knutston adopted 3 babies, Daniel, Anna, and Anita, from different families. But they were of similar ages, and they immediately became a tight-knit trio. In many respects, they were a picture-perfect family to everyone who knew them. Anita was a loving daughter too, but she was also exceptionally ambitious. In 2007, she was only 18, but she was already living on her own and working 2 jobs. Why? Because she wanted to pay for her own university studies. Anita was a freshman at Minot State University.
This is Anita Knutston reporting live from North Dakota. There's a ginormous tornado coming towards us from the southeast.
Her dedication to work and relentless sense of humor made Anita really popular.
Anita was the coolest girl. Like, everybody at school loved her. I was really lucky to have her as my sister.
But she didn't work hard to be popular. In fact, she was quite natural.
She didn't really care a lot about what other people thought of her. She was the nicest person I've ever known.
And Anita was a big fighter for justice. She would always root for the underdog and make sure that no one was getting picked on at school.
When she was in high school, there was a girl the principal sent her home because she didn't follow the dress code. She went to the principal and says, "I think you need to apologize to this girl." She says, "I make the rules around here." And she says, "I know you do. You got them written down." Every day when she'd come to school, she'd stick her head in the door and said, "Have you apologized yet?" And finally he did. That was the kind of person she was.
On the first day of June 2007, Sharon remembers having a very regular chat with her daughter.
I talked to her Friday. She said she was going home. And that was the last time I talked to her.
On Friday evening, Anita called her mom as she was returning home from her job at Fairfield Inn.
I called her Saturday, just out of habit of calling her every day almost. And she didn't answer, so I called Sunday, no answer Sunday. And so Monday, I called her and still no answer. She should have been answering her phone.
By Monday, June 4th, the Knutstons had a very bad feeling about it all. Anita was a social animal and a very loving daughter. Her parents thought they'd give her some space over the weekend. She was a young adult who'd recently moved into her own place after all. But when 3 days went by without a message, they realized something was off. So Gordon got into his car and drove to Anita's flat. But that's when things got even more worrying.
When did you know something was wrong?
I went and knocked on the door and it didn't answer, and her car was there.
No matter how hard Gordon knocked, no one answered. He even tried to go inside the house, but the door was locked and the windows were down.
So I went to the apartment manager and said that I wanted her to open the door. First she said she couldn't do that because she could get in trouble. And I said, "Well, I think maybe you'll get in trouble if you don't."
When the manager's boyfriend came in, he showed Gordon something he found over the weekend. A sliced window screen thrown into the yard. Sadly, this belonged to Anita's bedroom window.
They go over to where the window was, and I seen somebody laying in there. And I walked over, and the window was open, and I touched her head. And I says, you get that door open right now.
So the manager opened the door to Anita's place, and Gordon rushed into his daughter. It looked like she was sleeping peacefully, but what sleep is that deep? When he got closer, his blood froze.
The mattress was soaked with blood. She was covered up with a large house coat. She was laying face down on the bed. I touched her and her body was cold, so I knew she was dead. From that point, I think I was just in total shock.
What do you even do after you find your daughter like this? As the hotel manager called 911, Gordon called his wife.
He just called me and he said, Anita's dead. That was real hard, because for the adoption, I had to go to court and tell the judge I would take care of her and make sure she was safe her whole life. And I didn't manage to do that. Didn't protect her that one day.
It wasn't Sharon's fault. She couldn't stand by her daughter 24/7, but imagine living with the fact that months after she left home, your daughter was stabbed and killed in her own bed. An hour later, Anna and Daniel were in the same car when Daniel got the call. Immediately, he started crying.
We're driving home and my brother was crying. I was like, Daniel, what's wrong? Like, I've never really seen my brother cry or even be like the slightest bit sad. And he's like, Anita's dead.
It's not easy to process words like this. Not when you haven't had a chance to say goodbye.
At that moment, I didn't understand. I obviously understand what those words mean, but to hear it, I was just kind of like, she's dead? Like, she's so young. Like, she's the nicest person. Like, what happened? And he told me that somebody killed her. And
the Knutstons were devastated as they were outraged. Who would want Anita dead? She was a kind, friendly, popular girl with lots of friends. She'd never spoken about someone that scared her or hated her. As far as her family knew, Anita had no enemies, which is what made the police's work quite hard. First, they had to canvass the crime scene for any clues.
According to the forensics from the crime lab, said that she was killed on Sunday morning. It was with a pocket knife, 3/4-inch blade, I would suspect, multiple wounds to the chest.
Anita's home hadn't been altered in any way. The killer hadn't taken any objects, and they didn't look for anything in particular. It was clear they simply wanted her dead. The killer even left a pocket knife at the foot of Anita's bed, almost like saying, "The police won't ever catch me." Indeed, there were only DNA traces on the pocket knife. The killer was probably wearing gloves. So, without a DNA profile, the police had to look at the motive.
Were there any signs of sexual assault?
The police say no.
Sign of robbery? Were any of her belongings missing?
Well, that's a real interesting part of it, I thought, is that nothing was discovered missing. It was not considered a robbery at all, just plain murder.
As the investigators tried to unearth the reality behind Anita's murder, they discovered more questions than answers. If Anita would have been chosen randomly as a victim, then chances were she would have also been robbed or assaulted, but she wasn't, so it was most likely a targeted attack. Still, who would target Anita?
I don't know that I ever met anybody that did not like her.
She was that type of person. If you were an underdog, she was befriending you. She was always there for whoever needed a friend.
The first natural question for any investigator in this case was, what was Anita's love life like? At that time, Anita wasn't dating anybody, but she did have a very insistent prom date, Tyler.
She did mention one time after the prom that he was kind of persistent. She didn't say this, but he'd probably been trying to get her to go out, and she wasn't going out with anybody.
So it appeared he was more interested in her than...
And she wasn't him.
And Tyler didn't take no for an answer. After they graduated, Anita told him she would relocate so she could live by herself and be closer to college. What did Tyler do? He moved into the same apartment complex as her. Honestly, he might have been 18, but this was pretty creepy nonetheless. When the police learned about these from Gordon and Sharon, they realized they had to bring Tyler in for questioning. And it was really easy. Tyler was snooping around the crime scene, waiting for answers about Anita's case.
He was there not too long after the day that I found her.
Was his behavior odd?
Yeah, I would say it was odd. There was no tears.
Right after the murder.
Right. I thought that Tyler was acting suspicious, and I thought it could be him.
In fact, Anita's whole family was pretty suspicious of Tyler. Just who follows someone around like that? Who moves into the same building as their crush, even after their crush has clearly rejected their advances?
If I were to pick out folks that I thought were her best friends, I don't know that I'd necessarily say that Tyler was one of them.
But when the police took Tyler to their van, he denied having anything to do with Anita's murder.
They interviewed me the very second I got up there. When they first interviewed me, I was actually at the crime scene in the van. They were concerned because I knew exactly when I last talked to her. They kept asking me about that, but that's because when I got up there, the first person I saw was her aunt. And her aunt asked me when the last time I talked to her, so I went on my computer and checked my chat logs. And they just kept pounding me on that.
The police let Tyler go, and a few days later they invited him for an interview again. They were pretty sure he was innocent, but his stalker-like behavior with Anita before her murder was enough to make the police suspicious. So the investigators kept a quiet eye on him. And over the next few days, Tyler made a big deal out of Anita's murder. He made a 20-minute long tribute for her and posted it on all social media accounts. Then he continued to write posts about her.
Don't get me wrong, I appreciate all that he's done, but I think it's a little odd that he's so involved.
Would you call Tyler's behavior a little obsessive?
A bit obsessive, yeah.
Tyler's behavior didn't even change years later, and he got married.
You would think he'd go back more in the shadows somewhere since he got married and that, but he's always out there.
A decade after Anita's murder, Tyler himself spoke to True Crime Daily about his time with his crush.
She was my best friend back in high school in the beginning years of college. Went to high school together, went to our senior prom together.
Were you dating?
No, not dating. I just had a crush on her. We were just friends.
Oh, so you had a crush on her?
Yes.
Tyler insisted that it was never love or an obsession for his friend, just a regular high school crush. But even then, the police were suspicious of Tyler. He still seemed oddly interested in Anita's case.
8 years since Anita was murdered. Why haven't you been able to let go?
Because she was just so amazing. It just meant that much to me. Back in my first days of college, all my high school friends moved away, and she was my only friend I had then. I'm a quiet, shy guy, and I'm not that much outgoing, so at that time, she was my only friend. She was just the most amazing person in the world, and she didn't deserve any of this.
So, Tyler was crossed off the suspect list, but the police were still at a loss as to who could have wanted Anita dead. A few weeks into the investigation, a witness called the police, and they said they saw a man running away from Anita's apartment complex during the night between Saturday and Sunday when Anita was killed. The witness even described the suspect to the police, and they released this sketch to the public. Within hours, the suspect contacted the police.
That person came forward right away as soon as he saw that the photograph was published, or the drawing was published, and resembled him. He came forward and was cleared immediately.
That's because he wasn't running away from something. He was simply jogging. So the police dug even deeper into the suspect pool. They looked at everyone who had anything to do with Anita or her apartment.
There was some maintenance men working on a building nearby doing roofing. The temporary workers in the area doing roofing that left. It was thought that perhaps one of those people could have been involved in that.
But even they were taken one by one and slowly cleared of all suspicion. The last man the police suspected was the maintenance guy to Anita's apartment complex. He was the manager's boyfriend, and he had access to every apartment in the complex. And since there were no signs of a break-in, he could have easily been the culprit. Then there was Gordon's statement. Remember the maintenance guy showed him the screen to Anita's bedroom? He could have seen the screen there at the moment, or he could have known it was there all along. However, when the police questioned him, he was also cleared of all suspicion, and sadly, 1 year after Anita's murder, he took his own life. So when the investigators excluded every man in Anita's circle, they started looking at a girl, Anita's roommate.
She had a girl roommate, and they didn't get along. That person was not a safe person She would have male friends over, and then Anita would tell me she would leave and leave the male friends there, whoever they might be.
And when Anita would tell her to stop doing this, she would only get more and more defensive. Who was she to tell her how to live her life? This was a problem because it affected Anita's life too, but she didn't seem to care.
Had Anita expressed concern over her roommate to you?
Oh yes, many times. According to Anita, on her cell phone, this person would text to her, threatening letters.
Anita felt stuck in this argument. She couldn't just get her things and leave her apartment, and the process to move flats was not a quick and easy one. So during the last months of her life, she complained to her mom about her roommate. Her name was Nicole Erin Rice, and she was a year or two older than Anita, but she didn't behave like a fellow student. She behaved like an enemy. The more Anita asked her to respect her privacy or not bring strange men into their apartment, the more Nicole seemed to do it, almost to taunt Anita.
Anita was scared of her.
She was scared for her life, scared?
Yeah.
In a very creepy twist, a third student was at their apartment when she heard Nicole tell Anita, "One way or another, I'm gonna get you out of this house." In May 2007, Anita was already making plans for moving out. Tragically, she never got to. So when the police finally turned their eyes to her and got this story from Gordon and Sharon, they decided to interview her on the day of Anita's funeral.
This roommate's mother came to me and was very upset because the police had requested that this roommate had go to the police station that day.
Of course, she didn't go without complaining to everyone she knew, including her protective mother. Isn't it weird that her mother complained to Sharon while she was having a funeral for her daughter? At the police station, Nicole had a strong alibi. She told them that she was away at her parents' for the whole weekend, and they lived on the other side of town. All the investigators could do was take a DNA swab from her and let her go. When Anita was thinking of moving home, she told her parents about another potential roommate.
And I said, "So you're not going to move in with so-and-so?" And she said, "No." She says, "I wouldn't move in there anyway because of her husband. If he was hitting on her, she didn't go for that. She would have probably said she was going to tell her friend."
This couple had a fair share of red flags on them, at least according to Gordon. A husband who had taken interest in Anita was definitely a person of interest in a murder investigation. But guess what? He was cleared of suspicion too. This is when Anita's murder became a cold case. The police might have forgotten about Anita, but her family did not. Not one bit. Her parents were desperate to get justice for her, and her brother's mental health was declining rapidly.
He wasn't as sociable with me as he had been.
He got into, and he was like running all the time. You could just feel it. But he was angry and running. And he was lost without her because they were super close.
6 years after Anita's murder, Daniel took his own life. One day he told his mother he loved her and that they'd chat the next day. But the next day, Sharon received a call from the police.
He himself.
Imagine not losing just one, but 2 children because of one evil person.
Being told twice that your siblings are gone, I mean, that's crazy. It's kind of weird because my parents have their own biological kids that are a lot older than me, but like Anita and Daniel, I mean, they were my brother and sister.
So you can imagine that the Knutsons wanted to see the police work the case again. But by 2017, the police still hadn't matched the DNA swabs they'd taken to the DNA traces found on the pocket knife. Either they didn't have the right technology to extract a profile from that little information, or there was a huge mistake there.
I know the police took DNA from a number of people, but I don't know if they attempted to match that with anyone.
When this information got to Anita's family, they couldn't believe it. Did investigators not even try to match the DNA found on the knife? Were they that oblivious to the very basics of a homicide case?
My confidence in the Atlantic Police is not very high.
But when the police spoke to the press, they ensured everyone they did check the DNA they had against the profiles they retrieved.
We recovered DNA evidence from the crime scene in general, including the knife. Nearly everyone that we interviewed submitted to a DNA sample, and all those samples have been compared to the DNA collected from the crime scene.
Throughout the 15 years between 2007 and 2022, the police continued to interview people with a connection to Anita, from her former classmates to her dance buddies. The police didn't really forget her. They continued to work in the background. A few years before the final arrest, the police released a new bit of information in the investigation.
The window leading into Anita's bedroom had a screen on it that was cut, and I believe that that was something that was done after the fact. There was some blood found on the cut of the screen, which certainly leads me to believe that it was done after the fact. I believe the purpose would be to mislead law enforcement, to try and show that this is possibly an entry point.
Pay close attention to the word misled. Do you remember how Anita's roommate Nicole was cleared of suspicion when she was interviewed? Well, apart from saying she was with her parents that weekend, and her parents confirming this, Nicole had sent Anita a text message after she was murdered. Of course, to the police, this looked like she didn't know she was dead. Why else would she be messaging her? Except, this was Nicole misleading them once more. In March 2022, Anita Knutson made the headlines once more. Nicole Erin Rice was arrested for her murder.
At about 3:25 p.m., 34-year-old Nicole Rice was arrested for murder and taken to Ward County Jail. Although most of the detectives who worked the original scene and investigation have retired, we have not forgotten about this case.
With new experts in the field and better technology, the police finally matched the DNA traces on the pocket knife to the profile submitted by Nicole 15 years prior. But Nicole didn't go down peacefully. She still kicked, screamed, and maintained that she was innocent.
She pleaded not guilty and is scheduled to appear in court in December of 2022.
Yeah. Imagine being caught after this many years and still denying your responsibility for it. It gets worse. Back in 2008 or 2009, Nicole got really drunk and she told someone at a party that she killed Anita. But both parties were drunk and the other one didn't take her seriously. Anita's killer could have been caught a couple of years after her murder. And there's another horrible twist. Did Nicole's parents actually lie to cover for her back in 2007? If she had a strong alibi, enough for the police to let her go, it means that her parents confirmed she was with them that weekend night. Sheesh. In the summer of 2022, Nicole made her first court appearance.
Rice made her initial appearance in the courtroom today via television from the Ward County Jail. A nearly full courtroom heard the prosecution request a bond of $1 million in cash due to the nature of the crime. The defense countered with a request of $250,000, which the judge ordered.
According to the Minot Daily News, Nicole Rice was charged with Class AA murder and is facing life in prison. Chief John Klug said,
"Finally, my heart goes out to the family. I wish we could have solved this sooner, but at the same time, I'm glad to say that we have a person responsible for the murder of Anita Knutson in custody."
It seems like her trial will be a fairly easy one. Nicole had access to Anita's apartment after all. They lived together. Their relationship had been in shambles for quite some time, as Anita confessed to several fights between them to her parents. And of course, Anita said she was scared of Nicole. Both her parents can testify to this. Digital forensics expert Eric Devlin analyzed the text messages between the two girls, and he concluded it was pretty clear they had become enemies by the spring of 2007. The fact that Nicole sent a text after she was dead, and that she never told the police about their conflicts during her first interview, only prove her guilt. Imagine being on the cusp of justice for once. Anita's parents haven't spoken to the media since Nicole's arrest, but they will probably make an appearance during her trial. Nicole's trial was set to begin in November 2022, but in October it was announced that it's been delayed to March 2023. Nicole's defense team might try to push this for as long as possible, but she's already in prison. And by the look of things, it's not very likely that she'll ever get out. Meanwhile, Anita and Daniel's family will forever remember two innocent people who had their whole lives ahead of them and who spread nothing but joy until their tragic end. Thanks for watching, you guys. Hey, don't be shy. Make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more. See you next time, and keep yourself safe.